Hi, I'm Brandon Flint with Rocky Mountain Water Distillers.
Today in this video, we'll show you how to replace the float gasket set on a Durastill water distiller. You should replace your float gasket set every 5 years, and it's a good idea to replace the float gasket set and the heating element seal kit at the same time so that you're replacing both seals every 5 years.
I'm working on a distiller today that needs a new float gasket. That's one of the most common things to go wrong with a distiller because we have a mechanical float in our boiling chamber. It's the most reliable way to operate the distiller. Occasionally the float gasket goes out. This distiller is 11 years old and this is the first time the float gasket's gone out. So that's a long time without ever repairing a distiller. This distiller's ran for 11 years with a whole family drinking out of it. They haven't taken very good care of it in the last 2 years. It's not been cleaned in 2 years, so it's kind of a mess, but we're going to work through it. First thing you do is take the cord out. You get that baby out so you don't get fried. Water and electricity do not mix very well. And then the next thing you do is you undo the 4 screws on the face of the distiller and you take that face plate off. They're those kind of screws that's a Phillips head. I've already taken 2 out just to speed things up. The front cover comes completely off. Now, a lot of guys try to take the top off to get into the guts of this distiller. The face plate is what you take off. You do not go start and taking the top of the distiller off, because then you'll send it to me in the mail and have me fix it. But just take the face plate off and set it to one side for a few minutes, and this is what you see inside your distiller. You'll see 2 switches, a reset switch, and here's your float. This is the one switch, this is another switch. They're micro switches. They sit on the float actuator. The float's inside the boiling chamber. The float gasket's behind these 2 nuts here, and this plate that holds the switches in place. We need to remove that to get to the float gasket, and that's what we're replacing. You can see there's a little bit of water damage in here. After 11 years and it's not been maintained correctly, you're going to have some seepage of water. That just looks kind of nasty. It really isn't that serious. You'll need a nut driver that's 7/16, and the first thing we'll do is we'll take a nut off, and that releases the plate that holds the switches on, the micro switches on, and we'll just set that nut up here on top. There's another one right here. And they're stainless steel, so they don't ever rust, kind of. Sometimes they get a little minerals on them. They look like they're rusty, but stainless steel doesn't rust. Now, the next thing you do is you pick this plate off, and you pull it out of here in the back, and make sure it isn't stuck to the insulation, and you don't rip it. It's kind of fragile, but it's not that bad. You just pull that down like that. After the faceplate's removed, you have 2 more nuts underneath the faceplate, and then there's the actuator. You can unscrew that right now. It should be just finger tight, and nothing's not. So I have pliers. And it's brass, so brass on stainless steel. After you get it loose, you just take it off, and it's got a little corrosion on it, so it's squeaky. And you take that off and set it up there. Now we're after these other 2 nuts. We'll take them off, and they're not very tight at all. Sometimes they are. Sometimes these break off. Okay, you take the other nut off. And there's a lot of goo in there because this has been 11 years running, and it's got a little bit of goo. There's 2 stainless steel washers there. They'll need to be pried off a little bit. You just loosen them up and they come off. Okay, after you get to this point and you get those nuts off and the washers off, there's a plate in here. It's stainless steel. You put your screwdriver underneath it and you just pry it up gently, and it's what pushes against that float gasket and keeps it from leaking. And you pull that out and try not to get the insulation and ruin that. Tip it up and pull it out. There, that's what that is. And you can clean that up a little bit with some soap and water if you want, or a razor knife. Just get the rough stuff off. You just get this rough stuff off, front and back, in the hole. And you can really buff it up if you want to. Not necessary. And there, that's clean enough to put back in. And we'll put that up there till we're finished. Now we take out the gasket, the old gasket. You just put your fingers in there and peel that back. It's a two-part gasket. You can see why it's leaking, because there's a great big hole in it that's not around the shaft there, and that's what it's going to make a seal on this shaft and on that tank. So that's an old one. Now I'm going to show you a new one and how it comes from Durastill. This is in a package. There's a lot of difference in the color of a new one and an old one. And you'll notice inside the bag, when you get a part from Durastill, you'll have a set of instructions. We'll cut this bag open and we'll pull the instructions out. And it says float gasket replacement instructions. This is what's on the outside that we've just taken off. This is what's inside the tank. This is a float guide, and it has a little hole in it that this tail goes through, and here's where your float gasket comes out. This is where your float comes out through the gasket, and that actuator screws onto it after you put all the new stuff on it. The float bulb goes up and down in your boiling chamber. If any of this is broken, it gives you the serial numbers here, what to order. So every piece has a serial number and you can order it. And it tells you step by step how to replace this gasket. Now I'll show you the gaskets and how they go on. You take a screwdriver and scrape off the roughness here on the boiling chamber where the float gasket comes through. It doesn't need to be perfect, just so it's going to make a good seal. Get it all loosened up and so it's scraped off, and you can take a towel and you just wipe off the gook. And that should be good enough. Now you can push that float in so you don't have to wrestle around with that. You notice everything's loose because it's come loose inside. First thing you push that float in. You can put your hand inside and take it partially out. And the first thing you put on is your neoprene rubber gasket, the soft one, the thick one, the colored one. Sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's red. And you push that on as far as you can. And then you wrestle that float gasket through that hole. And it's tight. And it should make a nice seal. And then this is what does the work. This is the strong piece. And it's got webbing inside of it that holds it all in there real tight. You put that small hole through first because it's the longest. You just push it on. It's really tough. and it goes over all the threaded bolts here. It has to be tough to last 11 years. I can't believe this has been going 11 years. And then you put the gasket plate on. Push that on there like that till you get it on pretty good. Put your washers back on. There's 2 on each side. This gives it a space so that the switches don't bottom out in the front, and I'll show you about that. You start those nuts on there. Okay, after you get the plate on and the nuts started, you just take your nut driver and you screw that on until it becomes tight against the plate. And you can see your new gaskets formed a good seal around that actuator. And it takes a little bit of screwing down to get that cleared back against the tank. Don't leave it loose, but don't tighten it up so tight you break those nuts off on the inside. I've seen that done, and you have to get another piece. You tighten it just about as tight as you can with the nut driver, and then you don't break them off. If I put a wrench on there, I'm sure I'd break it off. Okay, now what you do is you put the switch plate back on. Okay, then you put your nuts back on to hold your switch plate. Get them started. And this is important, you get the switch plate back on tight, because if it's not, it can be out of adjustment. Then you take your little actuator and nut for the seal, and this has a smooth front, which doesn't cut that seal. You get all this scraped off and it makes it look almost brand new. You can see there's green stuff on there. That's copper sulfate out of the water. They put that in at the water treatment plant. Kills algae. Distiller takes all that out. There, we got cleaned up pretty nice. And then that's your nut. It's got a smooth spot right there that won't cut the washer. And we're ready to put that back on. It screws right on, right through there. Just keep screwing until you got a nice tight fit on that neoprene washer. And you want to get it good and thumb tight. You don't use a wrench on it because that can cut it. It is a soft gasket behind that. The front's tough and pliable too, but the back is soft. And there you go. You got your new float gasket on there. Here your switch is working right. And that's how it's supposed to work. Okay. Put the faceplate back on. Put your screws in. And that's it. You're ready to go. Turn it back on and get it running.